These days, sex scandals are 10 a penny. Seemingly every politician you can think of is doing drugs, using rent boys, or both. But this grand British tradition had to start somewhere, and that somewhere was in the flat of John Profumo. The Profumo scandal is hard to summarise. Essentially, it's a big web of infidelity, Cold War intrigue, and idiocy. But there's way more to it than that, so let's start at the beginning with a woman called Christine Keeler. Christine Keeler's life was really horrible. Too horrible to really talk about in any great detail on a show as light-hearted as this. In short, she was pushed about and taken advantage of by pretty much every man she came across. By age 17, she was working as a part-time model and full-time topless showgirl in Soho. Understandably, through this line of work, she met a lot of men, the most pivotal of which being a socialite doctor called Stephen Ward. Ward was an interesting fellow. While he was known for his medical work, he was just as well known for being a fantastic portrait artist. He'd treated the rich and famous elite of the world, from Gandhi to Sinatra, and had drawn a fair amount of them too. He was well known and well liked, and he grew attached to Keeler, and the two started living together. Abetted by the head of the Daily Telegraph at the time, Ward made it his mission to draw the Soviet High Command. Naturally, doing this as a British-American citizen is going to require some inside vouching. So naturally, he had to find the right person at the Russian embassy to let him in, so to speak. And that person was Eugene Ivanov, a person so obscure that there's only one picture on Google Images of him, and I don't have the rights to it. We're just going to have to deal with the silhouette for now, I think, until I can think of something better. Ivanov was a Russian embassy attaché with ambitions. The Soviets asked him to penetrate high society in England, and he did just that, largely thanks to Ward. In the midst of all this, Ivanov found time in his schedule to, go out with Christine Keeler like everyone else. It didn't last, though. A few months later, Ward and Keeler would go to a private party. And in that party, whilst Ivanov and Ward were talking about the potential of US missiles being planted in West Germany, Keeler found Profumo. So who was this Profumo bloke when he's at home? Or at Christine Keeler's flat? Lord John Profumo was a Conservative MP, senior cabinet minister, and hereditary peer. He was a member of the British elite. Profumo was well respected, came from inherited wealth, and was generally well liked. Their affair was, as described by many, passionate, intense, but extremely short and really of no consequence. There was no real salacious detail or interesting story. It was your average, scarily well-planned affair, I'm afraid. Any real anecdotes to share? Not really. The best one in the book is her cooking sausages before they do it. I mean, that's it. There's actually better anecdotes from Keeler about Ivanov, who she described as having, quote, an extremely hairy chest. And based on that, that silhouette is out and Zangief from Street Fighter is in. Anyway, life moves on. By the end of '62, Profumo and Keeler had fizzled out, Keeler wasn't really seeing Ward or Ivanov anymore, and she was living with a jazz promoter called Johnny Edgecombe. Even though this was the case, and everything had ended, there was an aura of suspicion around Ward, Ivanov, and also rumours about a government minister having it off with Keeler as well. It wasn't quite an open secret, but people had their inklings. There was nothing, however, hard to go on. There was also no catalyst for it to reach the masses as well. So it could be forgotten about, and no one would ever know the truth. Then one day, Johnny Edgecombe decides to knife one of Christine Keeler's ex-boyfriends in a Soho nightclub. Christine Keeler, understandably, not a big fan of this, so she decides to break it off with Edgecombe. She also drops in that she's also going to testify against him in the now inevitable court trial about the knifing. Edgecombe decides that the rational response to being told this is to go outside Ward's flat, where Christine Keeler's hiding, and open fire with a stolen handgun. So now there's two trials involving Keeler and one also now involving Ward. Oh dear. Keeler decides at this point that it'd be a fantastic idea to tell pretty much everyone that's ever lived every sordid detail about the whole affair. She also decides to sell her story to the presses. But before anyone can hit print, Ward and Profumo quite literally stop the presses. The UK has some of the strictest libel laws in the world. Because the papers couldn't prove the rumours, they could be bullied into submission by Profumo's lawyers. A few months have passed, Ivanov has been recalled by the Soviet Union, and the Johnny Edgecombe trials are about to start. One problem? Their key witness, a certain Christine Keeler, has run the country, which is very, very illegal. Edgecombe still went to prison, mind you. I mean, there are other witnesses and it was pretty obvious he stabbed someone, but it did draw national attention to it, though the papers couldn't quite report on it yet because it had unconfirmable details.
Then one day, that all changed.
On the 21st of March 1963, Labour MP George Wigg gave a short speech to Parliament. Thanks to a thing called parliamentary privilege, defamation laws don't apply in the House. So, he could mention the Edgecombe shooting, he could mention Christine Keeler, he could mention Profumo, and everything else. Profumo spent the last couple of months trying to hide his incompetency and adultery, and had it smattered down in about 2 minutes. The next day, Profumo issued this statement to the House, and I'd like to remind you that lying to the House is a very, very serious crime. Or at least it was. I met Miss Keeler on about a dozen occasions when I called to see Ward and his friends. Miss Keeler and I were on friendly terms. There was no impropriety whatsoever in my acquaintanceship with Miss Keeler. Remind you of anyone?
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Around this time, a formal investigation into Stephen Ward's national security risks had also started too, during which Christine Keeler told the police everything. Ward retaliated by sending lots of letters to anything vaguely government-shaped, including the leader of the opposition at the time, Harold Wilson. He now was saying that he was bullied into submission by Profumo. Shortly after sending these letters, he was then arrested for living off the immoral earnings of prostitutes. A lot of later writers have suggested that this was a setup to publicly disgrace him, along with the accusations that he was a Russian spy. Unfortunately, these all worked, and Ward killed himself in August 1963. For Profumo, though, the scandal was still heating up, and the Tory party had started their own investigation into his affairs. Whilst on holiday with his wife and kids, he was summoned back to London, and at that moment he realised he was in too deep and confessed everything. He resigned from political office pretty much immediately. The scandal that followed dragged on for years. As late as 1969, almost 6 years after the scandal had started, the News of the World was still paying Christine Keeler for new memoirs. Keeler was still revealing bits of the scandal as late as 2001.
Though these later allegations are widely believed to be false. So, with that in mind, 50 years later, what happened to everyone?
After the scandal, Profumo decided to volunteer at Toynbee Hall and lived off his inherited wealth. An option that Keeler, Ivanov and everyone else in the story obviously didn't have. Edgecombe didn't really do anything important after he came out of prison.
And Ivanov, according to Russian Wikipedia, was found dead sometime in the mid-90s.
When I decided to do this episode, I thought it was going to be a lot funnier, to be honest. Like Jeffrey Archer or Angus Dayton or Keith Vaz, funny scandals. So I was quite disappointed when I started reading the books that it's actually fairly non-eventful. Bear in mind, this is just a summary of what happened. If you want a more detailed understanding of it, I recommend reading the books that I've cited. It's unlike every sex scandal after it, given how little actually happened that was sex.
This scandal did change how we viewed politicians forever. Before this, surprisingly, people used to look up to them. Whilst as nowadays, if this sort of thing happens, it's just white noise, as most of us have grown to find politicians both contemptuous and arguably flawed regular human beings rather than crown-appointed deities.
I actually feel quite sorry for Christine Keeler. I mean, sure, she did milk the situation, but wouldn't you? If you had no money, no standing in society, and a history of being routinely exploited by horrible, abusive and manipulative men, wouldn't you do the same? I know I would. Well, except sleep with John Profumo, obviously. I mean, he might have been a great man, as she put it, but come on, he looks like a melted waxwork of himself. Well, it's not like he can sue now, is it?